Whether thou art a ghost that hath come from the earth, or a phantom of night that hath no hollow, or one that lieth dead in the desert, or a ghost unburied, or a demon, or a ghoul, whatever thou be, until thou art removed, thou shalt find here no water to drink. Thou shalt not stretch forth thy hand to our own. Into our house enter thou not. Through our fence break through thou not. We are protected, though we may be frightened. Our life you may not steal, though we may be scared to death.
Welcome to Scared to Death, Creeps, Peepers, Roberts, and Annabelles. I'm Dan.
Hey, Dan.
Hello, Lynze.
I'm Lynze.
And Lynze has a quick charity announcement for us.
Yes, just thinking about how crazy the weather is every year. Mm-hmm. Tornadoes, hurricanes, just all the things. It's kind of wild anymore. We decided that this month's charity should be the Y'all Squad, which I just love the name anyways. Their mission is simple yet critical: to be among the first on scene when a tornado, hurricane, or any other weather-related disaster strikes. And they ask, how can we help? They aim to give the affected communities the necessary support and resources for recovery by way of rapid response from their team members closest to the area. Big thanks to fan Madison Wilson for sharing this charity with us. The Y'all Squad reminds me of another relief charity that we've worked with before, the St. Bernard Project.
Oh, yeah.
This one's just smaller, and we thought it would be a good choice. We've sent them $12,320. So good job, Patreon supporters.
You.
Thanks for making that possible. And we set aside $1,370 for next year's scholarship fund. And if you'd like to learn more or donate, you can visit theyallsquad.org for more info.
Perfect.
Thank you. I try.
And then before we get into our stories, a quick note on our recording process. We will no longer be including video after today's episode, and here is why. We tried video out here at Bad Magic for, 4, 5, maybe 6 years now. While a fair number of fans did watch this show specifically during the pandemic, the number of those who actually watch as opposed to listen, dropped quite a bit after that.
And for obvious reasons.
For obvious reasons, yeah. People got back into their lives.
Exactly.
It's easier to listen to it on the go. And just the number of people who watch the show compared to who listen, substantially smaller. Like I would say 98% of our audience listens only.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. We have the numbers to back that up.
Yeah. And while, and we've always felt that, recording for video is less than ideal. It's better just to do audio anyway. We've been on the fence with this for a few years, actually.
Yeah, it's just kind of weird. You just find yourself being really self-conscious and, the reactions, the faces, what you're wearing, your posture, all those things, you're just, if you're self-conscious about how you look, the story delivery changes.
Yeah. And most storytelling based, long form storytelling, they don't do video.
That's right.
They do audio only, like Jim Harold's podcast, No Sleep, Lore.
Yeah, all the big ones.
Yeah, it's much more common to do, My Favorite Murder, Small Town Murder, just to do audio. I did video because of pressure from the agency we were with at the time, actually, because, coming from a stand-up background, stand-up comics do video for their podcasts, but they do guest-based podcasts.
Yeah, so it's more interesting.
It's dynamic.
Yeah, it's just us week after week. And so sweet of you for those of you who've been but I love seeing your face.
Yeah.
And it is so kind.
And we'll still be on socials.
Yeah, and don't mistake that. But it's on a guest-based show, it's oh, who's going to be on this week? Oh, I wonder what they're wearing. Oh, I wonder what they look like. I wonder how they react. When it's just the same two people every week, it's just less exciting to watch.
Yeah, totally.
We get that.
And we will still be putting episodes up on YouTube just with a thumbnail image for the image and then just the audio.
Yeah, because there are definitely a lot of you that like to listen via YouTube, and we're aware of that, and we don't want to take that away from you.
Totally. And also the change is happening because Logan Keith is, earlier this year told us he is moving back to Indiana for family reasons.
Yeah.
We're totally supportive.
Well, we think it's great for him.
Yeah. And in order to keep working with him, which is what we want to do.
Yeah, he's been with us a long time.
Yeah, we need to make this change. It would just be too cumbersome to do video editing from afar with the upload of the big files, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
We'd have to get somebody in-house. We wouldn't be able to employ them and Logan. So for the sake of continuity and continuing to work with the core group, this is better as well. Last thing, the new audio setup.
It's so good.
Sounds so much better.
You guys are going to be, I think, you're going to be blown away. And I don't have the best ears, and even I can tell a difference.
Much richer, more true to our natural voices.
Yes.
That plus the comfort of just kind of be able to record anytime we want. We'll probably start recording the show in the evenings oftentimes to get in the mood more. We can cozy up however we want, be more focused on the story. I think it's going to be a better change for 98% of you. So thank you in advance for understanding. And that's why we're doing it.
Yep.
All right. And then Logan will say something at the end of the show to this one. Last time on the mic in the producer's chair, but he'll still be scoring, editing the videos from afar, or audio files. There we go. There we go.
He's still with us.
So how many fan tales do you have today, Lulu?
I have 2, Daniel. And my first takes us to Mexico and for some Mexican folklore. And I don't want to tell you which Mexican folklore it is.
All right.
It's one that we're familiar with, but I want you to try and guess as I'm telling you the story. I want you to be able to really get in your head and think like, where's this going?
Okay.
Because the reveal is at the end and I think it's great. And then my second story, just a creepy, creepy story about somebody thinking they're home alone when they're not.
All right.
And I think we can all relate to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I have my normal 2. For my first, I'll take you on a road trip to the northern tip of Alaska, up in the Arctic Circle, where life is hard, sparse, maybe more diverse than we currently know of with certainty. Did some young friends run across some sort of monster? My next story is a small one. It's the House of Seven Chimneys in Madrid, Spain. It is allegedly haunted by the ghosts of 2 people connected to a possible early and unsolved murder involving the Spanish king.
I love Spain.
Yeah, I want to go so bad.
Oh, yes. Let's go. It's a lot of drinking and napping and other sexy things.
Yeah, sangria and paella and I don't know.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
All those things.
You socked up and ready to go, chick?
I am, Rooster. Dan and I got some new nicknames this weekend just out of pure nonsense. Look at these FU fingers.
Mm-hmm.
And just like on that note about video, we will be posting the socks.
Yeah.
So don't worry. Don't worry. You're still going to get your sock fill for those of you who are...
who like continuity, who like tradition.
Which is me.
Okay. So you ready to go?
I'm ready, bro. Let's go.
Have you ever heard of the James Dalton Highway?
Nope.
Usually referred to as the Dalton Highway or Alaska Route 11, Dalton Highway is a 414-mile stretch of road that begins north of Fairbanks, ends at Dead Horse, an unincorporated community that's more of a company town for oil workers employed in some manner in the Prudhoe Bay oil field in the Arctic Ocean than it is a town. This long stretch of desolate road was built for oil. It was carved through the tundra as a supply road to support the Trans-Alaskan Pipeline System in 1974, named after James Dalton, a lifelong Alaskan and engineer who supervised construction of the Distant Early Warning Line, a system of radar stations in the Arctic, set up to monitor any potential Soviet bombers during the Cold War. This highway is one of the most rural, isolated, and dangerous ones in the world. There are just 3 towns, so small you can barely justify calling them towns along this route. Coldfoot, the biggest with a population of 35, Wiseman with a year-round population of 12 and a summer population of around 20, and then the aforementioned Dead Horse, which is 25 permanent residents. 2 other settlements, Prospect Creek and Galbraith Lake, uninhabited except for campers and other short-term seasonal residents. Fuel is thankfully available near the E.L. Patton Yukon River Bridge around mile 56, as well as in Coldfoot and Dead Horse. The only medical facilities are where the road starts and where it ends. In Fairbanks and Dead Horse, with over 400 miles between EMTs, doctors, and medical equipment. And because of that, anyone embarking on a journey on the Dalton Road is encouraged to bring their own survival gear and first aid with them. Sounds intense, right? For most people, many of them truckers, they claim it's not. That they know the Dalton Highway like the back of their hands. They know where to stop along the way, how to navigate the unbelievably steep grades, which can reach up to 16% in places. And a 16% grade on an icy road for most of us would feel like we were heading down a cliff on a sled.
That sounds like hell.
Oh, yeah. Most of the road is unpaved, and you can get a flat tire if you're not careful. Heaven forbid you find yourself stranded without a spare. And that's only the beginning of the trouble you could find yourself in. The Dalton Highway has a reputation, perhaps unsurprisingly, for fatalities and nasty ones. Vehicles will spin out, hit wildlife, slide into oncoming traffic, or run aground for any number of reasons, just like they do on any number of other roads around the world. But the Dalton Highway adds another danger. If the crash doesn't kill you, the cold very well might. You'll experience a few seconds of panic before the real terror, your abandonment to the elements, where the air can reach record lows of 80 below zero, and you know that no one else might drive by for hours, sets in. And some claim, in addition to the cold, there are other things out in the tundra to be afraid of. Unnamed things. What else might be lurking out there, also fighting to survive? The following anonymous claim revolves around an alleged encounter with one of those things. The names of all the people mentioned, including Cody, the narrator, have been changed. Time now for the tale of a mystery on the Tundra. I stepped out of my rented Honda CR-V SUV and eyed the wooden welcome sign at the start of the James W. Dalton Highway, announcing its name in cheerful, swirling script. Welcome to the James Dalton Highway. Nobody calls it that, Cody. My friend Allison, the only Alaskan in our group, had told me the night before when I'd mentioned it. It's just the Dalton Highway. You worried about me sounding like a tourist to who exactly? I shot back, cracking open another beer. A trucker? A moose? Shut up. Allison lobbed an empty beer can at my head and I ducked. The campfire glowed and crackled, making it seem like we were further out in the wilderness than we actually were. We were at a campground on the edge of Live and Good, Alaska. Me, Allison, Silas, and Gabe. And if I strained my ears, I could hear electronic music coming from a couple of campgrounds over, barely. Alaska seemed to have a way of muting everything, making things seem more distant than they were, as though to remind us of the impossibility of filling up all of its vast space. All right, kids, that's enough flirting, Silas declared, scooping up the empty can and placing it, responsibly, into a white garbage bag we tied to a tree. Now, who's got first shift tomorrow? Not it, Alice and I cried simultaneously, touching our fingers to our noses. And Gabe looked around baffled, one hand unconsciously drifting up to touch the cross necklace at his throat. I guess it's me? In retrospect, maybe we shouldn't have brought Gabe. Allison, Silas, and I had been best friends for as long as I can remember. I'm sure my mom could tell you exactly when we met, if it was first or second grade. But to me, there was no version of my life. There's no version of my life without them. Even when Allison's family moved to Fairbanks in 9th grade, we still kept in touch. And still kept bickering like an old married couple, as Silas would characterize it. In those days, I hardly registered Gabe. Silas's little brother is a real person. He was 5 years younger than Silas, which meant we were never really in school together. Whatever developmental milestone he'd gotten to, the rest of us were fleeing from, eager to prove ourselves as true grown-ups. There was the fact that Gabe was pretty religious while the rest of us weren't. He'd been close to his grandmother when he was young, and she went to church a lot. It wasn't that we looked down on him, we just couldn't really relate. To be clear, I loved Gabe like a little brother. But when we were home from college, it was always Silas I wanted to see. No, I craved seeing. Something about his presence made me feel like I was right at home again, even in Alaska, a state I'd never thought I'd visit. But as I watched the sun set over the campground, I had to admit that Allison was right. It was beautiful here. I didn't have the same thought the next morning at the start of the highway, but maybe that had more to do with the cold biting at my fingertips and the shitty gas station coffee I was drinking. Remind me why we didn't do this in the hottest part of the summer? Allison asked, as we lined up to take a photo in front of the sign, our hats pulled tight over our ears. Oh, right. It's because someone couldn't take off work. I stuck my tongue out at her. We graduated from college 2 years ago. It had already felt like such a long time. And I'd waffled a little before deciding I wanted to become an EMT. The summer before, when Allison had originally suggested this road trip, I was busy studying, taking my qualifying exams, and shadowing more experienced EMTs. My first break had come in early October, and I'd leapt at the chance to hang out with my friends, even if I didn't care much about the highway. Allison and Silas were the real adventurers. I was just tagging along. You're going to wish you hadn't said that when I'm saving your life, I replied. Gabe shuffled to join us at the sign, his eyes downcast, like he'd given up on trying to find his footing in our rapid-fire conversations. His fingers brushed his cross necklace again. I felt a sudden pang of pity for him. Hey, I murmured, squeezing his arm as Silas lined up the camera on the tripod. I'm glad you're here. Gabe smiled. Not the practiced smile of adults, but a full-on teenage grin. I am too, he said. And I remembered what it was like to be 19. How out of place you felt everywhere, on the border between childhood and adulthood. Say cheese, Silas said, jogging over to join us. And we all smiled, faces frozen as we waited for the camera to go off. And then as the responsible one, Silas made us do a full check of the vehicle. Spare tires, first aid kit, our camping gear, extra gas, extra water, a working satellite phone. And then it was time to drive. Within 20 minutes of driving, we'd lost all cell coverage, but that was fine. All of us were giddy at the prospect of spending an uninterrupted week together. 3 days there, 3 days back. There would be only the road, the occasional 18-wheeler, and the unending silver pipeline, winding through the forest to keep us company. By the middle of the day, we'd all grown tired of the sight of the towering trees bending under the weight of the snow, and Allison and I had started to play a game. We're going on a picnic, and we can take apples, but not bananas, Allison began. I frowned, trying to think of what the secret code was. What was able to be brought to the picnic? I'm going on a picnic and bringing grapes. Allison shook her head, mocked sadly. You can't go. But Gabe could. Gabe startled. After a couple of hours, Silas had taken over driving, and now Gabe was dozing off against the driver's side window in the back seat. I could what? He frowned. Sorry, did you need something? It's just a game. Allison waved her hand dismissively. Cody, what you got? I'm going on a picnic, and I'm bringing... Ah! The wheels grabbed frantically at the unpaved road as Silas slammed the brakes. Gabe was staring in horror out of his window. No, 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 he said, his eyes turning to Silas. Keep driving, keep driving. What? Allison craned her neck. But even from the back seat, I couldn't see anything either, just the unending snowy landscape. What's going on? What the fuck, Gabe? Silas said. You know you just can't scream when someone's driving. Keep driving! Gabe's voice was climbing in pitch. We gotta go, Si! We have to go now! Allison eyed me, and I knew what she was thinking. That Gabe was playing some kind of practical joke on us for some reason. Silas accelerated, and soon we were driving at the same speed again, but Gabe hadn't lost his terrified expression. So, Allison began, you gonna tell us what that was about? Gabe shut his eyes. Under his breath, he muttered, I think we should turn around. Turn around? Allison said. She was clearly going to ask him something else, but Silas put a hand on her arm. Bud, we can't turn around, he said to his brother. I knew he was trying to be gentle, but I could also hear his patience wearing thin. We booked all of our hotels, paid for them, and our flight back from Fairbanks isn't until Monday. You can walk if you want, Allison suggested, her eyes flicking devilishly to the road. It's only 100 miles or so at this point, huh? I think she expected that to jolt Gabe out of his stupor, to finally get him to roll his eyes back at us, make a joke, but instead he fell silent, one fingertip working at a hole in the knee of his jeans. Okay, he said quietly. Silas and Allison were looking ahead again, Allison trying to cue up some music on her phone, so it was only me that saw Gabe look up, as though through the roof of the car and touch his cross necklace. His lips were moving silently. Was he praying? Gabe thinks we're going to die out here, I suddenly thought. But why would he think that? Silas was the best driver I knew, so responsible that my mom called him instead of me when we would go out as teenagers. Allison knew Alaska and had every survival skill you'd ever need. And me, well, I was an EMT. That had to count for something, which meant it had to be something else. It was only after we were another 10 miles out that I realized Gabe still hadn't told us what he saw. But when I turned to ask him, I saw that he was asleep now, his head lolling against the headrest. I thought. Weird, but not that weird. He was still, for all intents and purposes, a kid. Though when I turned, I thought I saw his eye twitch. Maybe he was only pretending to sleep. But why would he do that? Maybe I was making a huge deal out of nothing. On we drove, into the Alaskan wilderness. The road twisted and heaved with dangerous curves and steep gradients, my stomach plummeting even though Silas drove safely. The road eased up only after we crossed the mighty Yukon River, Alaska's longest waterway, the waters churning blue and gray below us, while the extensive forest stretched far and wide in all directions. It was beautiful, even though the pipeline constantly reminded me that the road hadn't been built for merely scenic purposes. We soon settled into silence. Luckily, the Honda came equipped with the CB radio, tuned to Channel 19 for communicating with other vehicles on the road. The guy at the car rental service had told us that, aside from giving way to truckers at all times, the CD radio was part of Dalton Highway's informal rules. We should use it to give updates on traffic, weather, and road conditions if we came across anything. As we passed the sign marking the Arctic Circle, a maroon sign featuring an image of the globe as seen from the top, the CB radio cracked to life. Breaker, breaker, we got a northbound bear bait going past the 52, about 50 miles south of Coldfoot. Allison giggled. That means there's a four-wheeler going over the speed limit, she explained. Peering at the odometer, she commented, can't be us. Damn right it's not us. Silas was always proud of his driving, as he liked to boast to us. But Allison was already shushing him so she could hear the next snippet of the conversation. Breaker, breaker, 10-1. I repeat, 10-1. That means he's receiving poorly, Allison whispered. And indeed, the CB radio started dropping into static, so we could only hear snatches of dialogue back and forth. 1042, up on mile. An accident, I muttered, peering out of the window, though who knew where it was. 1042, 1042. This was a new voice, a woman's voice, it sounded like. I wondered if she was a tourist like us, using the CB radio for the first time from a rented car. Can you hear me? Can anyone hear me? Please, my husband, he's... But it cut off again, dropping into static. Another voice said cautiously, 1042, can you hear me? Can you give me a location? So cold, I can't figure out all of our supplies. The spurts of communication came through, grounding more and more, sounding more and more frantic each time. I have to go. I have to go. It saw me. It saw me. A couple of ragged breaths, and then the line went dead. All of us were facing straight forward, our eyes glued to the radio. Allison's mouth had dropped open in shock, and beside me, Gabe was moving his mouth again, his fingers clutching his cross necklace. Silas was the first to speak. Maybe a prank? Why would they want to prank truckers, though? Allison said more forcefully than she'd probably intended. They'd be putting those guys' jobs at risk, if not their lives. Hey, Silas said, let's not start panicking, freak ourselves out. Usually, I admired his level-headedness. It was, after all, what I aimed to replicate when I was arriving at the scenes of accidents of people who had heart attacks or aneurysms, putting them into the back of ambulances. But now it left me feeling cold. Get ahead of ourselves. He was acting like we were jumping to conclusions. But what other conclusion was there to jump to? Something terrible had happened, or was happening. By the time we pulled into Coldfoot, it was dark, had been for hours, and we were all relieved to be in a town. Maybe town is an exaggeration. There were refurbished shipping containers for accommodation, a gas pump, a restaurant, and a population of about a dozen. It was a truck stop, really, but for what it lacked, it more than made up for with a bar, the only place along the highway to sit down and have a beer. You guys go ahead. Gabe waved us off, playing with the key to the shipping container we'd rented for the night. I can't even be in a bar, so I'm sure that wouldn't matter, Silas reassured him. You can just order something non-alcoholic. He tried to put his arm around Gabe, but Gabe shook him off, walked away. Within minutes, he was a tiny figure surrounded by white. A fine snow was coming down. What's his deal? Allison muttered. Even though we all loved each other fiercely, I could sense all of us were starting to get annoyed with each other, which made me sad. But then Silas pushed open the door to the pub. Bad night to be a beer, he said with a cheerful grin, and proceeded to order us around. The small staff bustled around, cheerfully wiping down counters. They really didn't need wiping down. I guess it wasn't that much to do. As I knocked back a pint, I asked a girl in a black apron about the weather and road conditions northwards to Dead Horse. Next to her, a trucker with a long white beard overheard me. Just drove up here from Fairbanks, he said. Conditions are fine. Can't say the same for the road, though. Oh, no. I explained that he'd misunderstood me. I was heading north, not south. That made his bushy eyebrows furrow. What for, young man? Whole lot of nothing up there. I laughed awkwardly. It was odd to tell someone whose livelihood depended on the highway that we'd come for fun, as tourists. Just to see what kind of adventure we can get up to? I replied with a winning as smile as I could. The trucker grunted. Well, you drive safely. And watch out for them. The last word was drowned out by a sudden burst of music. One of the truckers had gotten the waitress to dance with him. I thought he said trucks, though. I could have sworn he said, watch out for them trucks. Continuing north on the Dalton Highway towards Dead Horse the next morning, the trucker's voice echoed in my head. Watch out for them moose, maybe? The sun was coming up now, emitting light that turned the clouds a velvety purple even while it remained below the horizon. Polar twilight, it was called. Within a couple of hours, the boreal forest thinned out, and we could see the peaks rising in front of us, slate gray and soaring high above the valleys. We passed the most northern spruce tree along the road, marking the transition between the Arctic forest and the tundra beyond. No trees, permafrost in the soil, and the mountains watching us from beyond. It was as breathtaking as it was eerie. Gabe had offered to drive, but Silas had taken one look at him and shaken his head. Gabe looked, to put it mildly, horrible. His eyes were framed by dark rings, and his face was pale like he hadn't slept. Up all night praying, I bet, Allison mumbled to me, rolling her eyes, but I didn't think it was very funny. Gabe was religious, but he barely prayed before meals, or at other times you would think people might pray. If he was praying, that meant he thought we were in real danger. Watch out for them. Watch out for them. I was jolted out of my thoughts as we rose through the Antietam Pass, the highest year-round mountain pass in the state, and the only one that cuts across the Brooks Range. My ears popped as we climbed in elevation. We'd get up to about 4,700 feet before dropping again, and then I could see the blinding whiteness beyond, making it difficult to tell where the road ended and where the steep drop to snow and nothingness began. Something struck me just then. What if there was no next word when the trucker said that? Watch out for them. Bang! Almost as soon as I had that thought, the car wrenched to the side, and I heard a horrible squealing sound as my head banged against the passenger window. Shit! Silas yelled, wrenching the steering wheel as hard as we could. For one terrifying moment, it looked like we might tumble over the edge, but Silas managed to turn the car and wedge it into a little inlet in the mountainside road. All of us were breathing heavily, our faces pale, eyes wide. Holy fuck, Allison said. Silas, was that the tire? Yeah. Silas's mouth was set in a thin, hard line. I could imagine what he was feeling, so proud of his driving, and yet here we were, stuck on the side of the frozen road. Damn it! Let me assess the damage. No, wait. Allison grabbed the sleeve of his shirt, looking over his shoulder. We were just past a bend in the road, which meant that any truck barreling down wouldn't be able to see us before turning us into roadkill. The idea of standing on the road, changing a tire, who knew how long that would take, when at any minute we could be crushed, was terrifying. We can't just not change the tire, Silas argued. Trucks are going to be coming through here at every hour of the day. There's no good time to do it. With one impatient finger, he jammed on the CB radio, and the sound of static filled the car. We got a four-wheeler with a blown-out tire. He trailed off, waiting for a response. Long moment passed, the heavy silence weighing down on us. No signal, Silas muttered. The mountain must be in the way. We don't have a choice, Al. I gotta go change it. Silas, please, Allison begged, her voice strained with fear. Let's just all take a second. There's a path, I interrupted. It was true, I could see a little path. Or was it wishful thinking? Around the side of the mountain just above the car. Maybe all the people who'd ever gotten stuck here had had the same idea. Aren't we pretty close to Dead Horse? Maybe if I climb up, I can get a signal. Allison looked dubious, but Silas nodded. For better or for worse, he was our unofficial leader. Always had been. I don't know. I mean, we could just try and fire up the satellite phone, but if you're going to go, somebody should go with you. I'll go, Gabe volunteered, surprising all of us. He'd been so quiet, we'd almost forgotten he was there. I have proper snow boots, he added, pointing to his feet. We'd all good-naturedly joked about them when he'd arrived. Did he think we were going dog sledding or something? But now I was grateful. I also thought, what does he think he'll need to run from? Okay, I said, that settles it. I hoped I sounded more confident than I felt. At first, all I could feel was the wind sweeping over the mountains and dousing us in a deep chill. My lungs burned with every step, and I had to force myself not to picture losing my footing and sliding down the mountain to my death below. Gabe was giving the car not far below the same nervous glances. You okay, dude? I asked, and Gabe shrugged. Yeah, just tired. There was a question lodged in my throat, one I'd wanted to ask him since the day before, but now felt like an inappropriate time. Still, I couldn't stop thinking about it, so I blurted it out. What did you see yesterday? From the car? Gabe stopped so suddenly he nearly slipped on the snow. Nothing, he stammered, not meeting my eyes. I didn't see anything. I could hear that he was lying, reminding me of the times he'd lied when we were kids about not taking the last popsicle or whatever. But I didn't know how to make him tell me the truth. You guys wouldn't believe me anyway, he muttered. So softly the words nearly carried away, but were nearly carried away by the wind. Gabe, I started, but before I could think of something, we'd reached a lookout. Not the top of the mountain, but a vantage point where we could see the valley spread out before us. The blank, snowy tundra going for miles and miles and miles. There's Dead Horse, I said, unable to keep the excitement out of my voice. It was a long way off, only a couple of dark specks in the wide, white spread, but I recognized the long neck of the drilling rig that I'd seen in some tourist pamphlets. We're not so far. I thought Gabe would be excited too, but he'd pulled out a pair of binoculars, looking down into the valley, closer to us, just around the bend from where our car was. His mouth was set in a heavy frown. What are you looking at? What's up? I was feeling a little impatient now. If Gabe wasn't going to tell me what he saw, what could I do about it, though? The car, he muttered. No, our car is back there, I said, but Gabe just pressed the binoculars into my hand. There's a car down there, not ours. Looking through the binoculars, I saw it. A black Chevy Tahoe, a thin but sparkling layer of snow covering the roof. The idea that someone was just around the corner was an immediate relief. Maybe they could give us a ride up to Dead Horse. But then I realized that all four doors to the car were open, and it didn't look like anyone was there. Focusing harder, I saw something else. The snow below the passenger side door was streaked with what looked like blood, like someone had been dragged away. The smear went for 5 or maybe 10 feet, thinned, then disappeared entirely. What the fuck? We should go back to our car, Gabe said, his face ashen. But already my EMT training had kicked in, and I was walking down the mountain purposefully, trying hard not to lose my balance and fall. Cody! Gabe called after me. Cody, we gotta go back to the car! But I had to do something. I had to help. Maybe they hit an animal, I thought. Maybe they tried to drag it away to clear the road. But I knew that if someone had been dragging an animal, we'd have seen them from the lookout. And wait, hadn't we heard that an accident was reported over the radio yesterday? Had they been out here a full 24 hours? Heart pounding, I skidded down until I was nearly back on the road. The closer I got, the more my skin prickled, telling me to get out. But I've been trained to ignore that exact same feeling. I took great pride in the fact that I kept going where other people got scared. Hello? I called out, straining to yell over the wind. Hello? I'm here to help. The car stood there, silent, cold. Heart pounding, I approached the front passenger side door, the door with the bloody trail coming from it. The blood was thick and frozen, and my heart immediately plummeted to my stomach. Nobody could lose that much blood and stay alive. It was an animal, I told myself it had to be. Among the blood were scattered pieces of paper, burnt scraps of fabric. Some of them flew out of the car as I watched, carried on the wind. "Hello?" I called again, less certain this time. I could see maps splayed across the passenger seat, half a protein bar still in its wrapper. Moving onto the back seat, I saw that someone had tried to fire up a camper stove. There was a circle of black smoke on the ceiling. When that hadn't worked, I realized with horror they had tried to burn their clothes. What the fuck? It was then that I realized that the only thing that wasn't open was the trunk. Blood rushing in my ears, I went to the back of the car, and the trunk unlatched easily. Please be nothing, I thought. Please be nothing in there. There was nothing. For a moment, I felt a wave of relief crash over me. Initially, I only saw some blankets, a couple of backpacks, suitcase on its side. But then my eye caught something. The shape under the blankets. It looked human. Holding my breath, I lifted up the blanket, and a woman's eyes peered out at me. Pale blue, the color of a frozen lake. A lock of dark hair fell in front of her eyes, and I almost apologized for the intrusion before I realized she hadn't moved. Of course she hadn't. She was dead. Her skin white tinged with blue. The cold had gotten her. I remember what we caught from the snippets of the CB radio, something about her husband. My eyes wandered over to the long trail of blood again. Dimly, I thought I heard a long, low whistling sound now, like an animal calling out to its pack. My skin prickled, but not just from the cold. For some reason, I hadn't thought that there would be animals out here. Maybe there weren't animals, I thought, at least not the kinds I knew about. Suddenly, I remembered that I left Gabe at the top of the mountain. "Gabe! Gabe!" I yelled as loud as I could, but no blurry figure appeared at the top to confirm he was still there. The path here was more treacherous. I slipped and fell, cutting my hand on a jagged piece of rock. "Oh, shit! Gabe! Gabe!" I scrambled back up the way I'd came, not caring how my hands burned from the snow. I couldn't believe I'd left him. What was I thinking? My lungs ached from the cold, but I pushed ahead, gasping as I hurled myself back up to the outlook. "Gabe!" A whimper came from just behind me, and I whirled around. Standing 20 feet from Gabe was a creature I'd never seen before. If I'd looked quickly and then looked away, I might have thought it was a wolf, but it looked hairless. Its skin, or thick-looking hide rather, mottled and dingy, but almost the same color as the dirty snow. It would have no problem blending in here in the tundra. Its shoulders were squared, its hips low to the ground in a sort of half squat, like it walked on 2 feet sometimes and all 4s at others. And its face was inhumanly long, wolfish, with pale pink gums and teeth, or fangs I guess, that glistened in the sunlight. Its hands, claws, paws, flexed, and I saw that they were coated in blood. Then, as though smelling blood in the air, the creature turned to look at me, and it made a sound I'd heard before, that whistle, long and loud. Was it calling to others? I had to do something. With all the strength I could muster, I tackled Gabe and sent us both flying over the edge, tumbling down the face of the mountain. My world was a blur of white and gray, and I felt the air get knocked out of my lungs as I crashed over and over on the tundra floor. Please don't let me die, I thought. And then I amended it. Please don't let Gabe die. Silas would never forgive me. With a thwack, I came to a rest, my head spinning. Beside me, Gabe slid to a halt and stood up, then promptly vomited. That, Gabe gasped, cradling a wrist that would turn out to be broken, was what I saw. Without any other option, we trudged on to Dead Horse. I don't know how far we walked. It must have been our miles. Our legs were frozen stiff, our eyes streamed with unshed tears, before a trucker pulled up next to us, honked loudly, startling us both, and gave us a ride. "You two crazy? Get in here!" When we made it to Dead Horse, I was shocked to see Allison and Silas waiting for us. "We managed to set off a flare and get someone to pick us up," Allison explained after she and Silas gave Gabe and I big crushing hugs. "What happened to you guys? Where were you?" "Tell you later," I mumbled. I was so tired I thought I was going to pass out, but Allison wouldn't let it go. "You saw it, didn't you?" she said quietly. Whatever it was? Silas saw it too, coming over the mountain. We must have gotten out just in time." She bit her lip. I knew what she was thinking. If they'd only been there a minute longer, they might have ended up like the people in the Tahoe. By the time anyone got back to the Tahoe, this was told me later by a trucker, the woman in the trunk was gone. A heavy snow had fallen, obscuring the trail of blood, and the conclusion was that whoever had the accident had started walking towards Dead Horse and succumbed to hypothermia somewhere out in the frozen tundra. But I knew I'd seen the woman in the trail of blood. But nothing about it made sense, and I didn't want to think about it more. As the years have passed, I've tried telling myself that I saw some kind of explainable accident and just gotten worked up, inventing a whole narrative for something that was likely tragic, but again, explainable. But that didn't really make any sense either. I'm an EMT. Good, if anything, at staring tragedy in the face. It's been several years now since I've been to Alaska, but I still keep up with my friends there. We don't talk about what happened on that trip much. I think we're all eager to write it off as youthful foolishness, thinking we could conquer one of the most dangerous highways in the world. We almost did. I do think about it more than I'd like to on my own. Sometimes when I'm scrolling late at night and I see a story about a person disappearing in Alaska, someone who decided to take the Dalton Highway, I wonder if whatever we saw that day is still out there and still hunting.
What is it?
It's like a Yeti type. Who knows? It's Skinwalker type. Who knows?
Yetis would be furry, wouldn't they?
I guess maybe they would.
So I think Yeti's out because it was hairless. I don't know. I like
some kind of wolf monster.
Comically, I was thinking of like a giant hairless cat.
I know. I wonder how big a hairless cat would have to get to go from being funny to being terrifying.
Well, I think they're terrifying no matter what.
Yeah, I think they look silly.
They just don't look how we think they're going to look, like how a cat, feline, whatever is going to look. So I just inherently am like, you silly little thing, you.
Uh-huh.
Do you have photos?
I do. Okay. Not from the story, but just like gathered some stuff from the web of like the road and stuff. This is a pic from the New York Times of the lonely, frozen Dalton Road.
No fucking thank you.
Over 400 miles and nothing.
Nope. I hate driving here in the snow.
Yeah. Yeah. I know it looks terrible.
Mean, I'd rather drive in snow than rain.
Mm-hmm.
But.
This is another photo taken in the twilight after sunset. Again, just showing how desolate this road is.
Also beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Like that purpley pink tinge to the sky.
Yeah.
It looks like cotton candy.
This is the great big town of Coldfoot, one of the best places in the U.S. to see the Northern Lights.
Oh my gosh.
Bunch of shipping containers and some metal sheds, like fabricated metal sheds.
I wonder, you referenced in the story, they referenced staying in a shipping container. So I wonder if those are like converted shipping containers. Yeah,
I did read up in like Dead Horse and some of these places, they're only allowed to do shipping containers. Actually, maybe just in Dead Horse, so that like when the oil is done being mined, they can get everything out of there and just let the area go back to being natural again.
Oh, that's cool.
But also it's so cold up there with the permafrost and the like that tundra, very, very hard to dig a foundation.
Oh, yeah, of course.
And there's no construction companies nearby.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
I am fascinated by the shipping container refurbishing or repurposing them.
Yeah, like some people do amazing jobs.
It's wild what they can do.
This photo is of Dead Horse, where the highway ends in the winter. Like, how unforgiving does that landscape look?
I just feel dead looking at it.
Whoa. Yeah. No trees, nothing. It's just too far north, too cold for almost any kind of vegetation.
Just think about
any animal.
Just think about how I panicked driving
the desert.
through the desert.
And this is worse.
This would be just as bad.
Yeah, this is far more desolate than the Nevada desert.
Ugh.
And then finally, here's a pic of the Alaskan tundra wolf. Is this what Cody and Knitter saw?
No, because that has hair.
It does have hair.
Or fur.
They're a large subspecies of the North American gray wolf. They can allegedly grow up to 6 feet in length and weigh up to 180 pounds.
Holy Hades.
Like
they're Kyler size.
Yeah, the normal variance is less than that.
Yeah.
But that's like reports of, some especially big ones have gotten up to that size. And that is human sized. And there have been a handful of documented instances in the last few decades of them, tracking, killing humans.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Why?
Very rare. But it makes sense to me. I mean, there's not a lot of life out there in the tundra. There's not a lot of, I don't think their association with humans would be hunting them. It's a terrible place to go hunting.
Mm-hmm.
And they're protected, all of these things. I mean, yeah, if you're like a pack up there in the frozen tundra and you're starving and you, on the rare chance you would see some random dude walking along, I would imagine they probably would go for him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, thank you. No, thank you. And for those who watch, I love that you're hot. I'm freezing over here. My toes are cold. For people who currently watch and to see the photos, just like a reminder.
Oh, yeah.
That once we're done with video, like you'll still just go to Instagram, Facebook to see the photos.
Yeah, so you could like pull them up as you're listening or whatever and check and know right away.
Exactly.
Are you ready to leave the desolation of northern Alaska and take a very quick little trip to Madrid, Spain?
Before we go, I just want to say that whole time I was in True Detective season 3 in my head.
I know. I thought of it too. It's like every time a setting now is in some it's particularly like northern Alaska.
Yeah.
Like the tundra, I think of Jodie Foster and True Detective.
Yep. It's such a great season.
It really was.
Yeah.
Next to the first season, my favorite season.
Yep. And beautifully shot. And if you haven't watched that yet, after listening to this, it will it'll sink in.
It's so funny you mentioned that because I was also thinking the same thing.
Oh, yeah.
And you mentioned the idea of foundations.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember watching that show for the first time and thinking, I don't know why I haven't ever thought of this. Like, how the hell do they build these buildings up there where it's like impossible to get concrete to set or whatever? I was just fascinated by this idea of like, oh, it's a totally different construction game up there. And I was just curious, like, how do they do that?
Yeah, the real Dead Horse, I mean, I don't know where that show was actually filmed, you know, like
where True Detective was
True Detective was, to make it look like it. But like the real Dead Horse is, I don't think there is any concrete foundations. Like all the buildings, like it's like almost like a Lego set. Like they have like just so many like shipping containers stacked on shipping containers, stacked on another one. And then I think they just like weave rooms out of multiple ones. They somehow just like build these modular buildings out of little tiny buildings.
It's so crazy.
It's a very, very different style.
Like a foreign concept to us, really.
Yeah. I mean, imagine up there, some ship could bring a bunch of construction supplies, maybe prefabricated or something. Or you could have like, there's probably like a 2-week window or some short little window where you can get a bunch of concrete up there. I'm sure it would be ridiculously expensive and a very specialized crew would have to be brought in. But I'm sure it's possible for like government buildings and stuff.
Yeah. Crazy town. I also, when they went to that bar and that one trucker was like, watch out for them. And, you know, and we didn't know what they were going to say. I was like, oh, I wonder if there's like ghost trucks because I thought he did say, watch out for the trucks. I was led to believe that. And then that thought, you know, was in my brain. I was like, oh, that would be so interesting if you were like going along the road and then there were just like these like ghost trucks.
Yeah.
You know, figments of your imagination, or they're there and they kidnap you and you just go missing forever.
Yeah.
I know.
I was thinking about how much it would suck to be stuck on the road. Like if you had a flat tire and weren't able to fully get off of the road.
Yep.
I was wondering why they didn't. I mean, we just have what this person wrote and I can't see it, but I'm like, put the car in neutral. Yes. Push. Get out there, get the car off the road.
Yeah.
Sit in a comfortable spot and then use the satellite phone.
I had the same thoughts. I was like, oh, to be young.
But, you know, you're panicking.
Yeah, of course.
Things are crazy. Yeah, you're not that far from the end of the road. Yeah, I guess.
Yeah. Okay, well, take me to Spain. Take me somewhere warm.
Just a little bit of setup for a little bit of story now. La Casa de las Siete Chimneys, or the House of Seven Chimneys, is a reportedly haunted mansion in Madrid, the capital of Spain. Some say that the House of Seven Chimneys represent the 7 deadly sins. The mansion was built sometime in the 16th century in the Chueca neighborhood of Madrid, mere meters away from the city's Gran Via. Today, the building is near the center of the city, but it was once on the outskirts, surrounded by beautiful orchards and gardens. Sources differ on the exact year the house was built, but it seems like most agree the house was built during the reign of Charles V, Holy Roman Emperor and King of Spain, to serve as a home for a loyal huntsman of his. Another version of the story is that King Charles's son, Philip II, had the mansion built so he could have a place to discreetly, visit his lover. The lover in question was a young lady of the royal court of remarkable beauty named Elena, who some sources describe as the loyal huntsman's daughter. Philip most likely hoped he could avoid court gossip by visiting Elena at the mansion, but prying eyes were always watching, and there was talk about how often she left the court to go to the House of Seven Chimneys. In an effort to stop the rumors that could destroy her reputation forever, Elena married a military officer named Captain Zapata. Philip II did not think that Elena would actually fall in love with her husband, but she did. Their love was so strong, in fact, she decided to end her affair with the future king for good. But then soon after the wedding, Captain Zapata was called to fight in the Netherlands, where he was killed in battle. Elena was, of course, devastated, and she fell into a deep depression. She isolated herself, stopped eating, stopped drinking, and soon she was dead. Word quickly spread that Elena did not die of natural causes, though, as was initially reported. Allegedly, the servants who came across her body found it covered in stab wounds.
Oh.
When this news reached the king, he publicly ordered an investigation into the cause of Elena's death, but now her body had mysteriously gone missing. Rumors spread that the king had not only already known of Elena's death before his call for his sham of an investigation, but that he had ordered Elena to be murdered to conceal the birth of an illegitimate child between Elena and his son. To distract from these rumors, royal suspicion, guided by the king, turned to Elena's father, the huntsman, who was now accused of committing the heinous and salacious crime of murdering his own daughter, and perhaps unborn granddaughter as well. And then this huntsman, overcome with grief over his daughter's tragic death and the shame of being falsely accused of her murder, hanged himself from a beam inside the House of Seven Chimneys. Then his body was removed from the house and hidden in an effort to avoid anyone speculating that his death was ordered by the king. Not long after his father's death, Philip II became King of Spain. Several years passed, and it seemed like the city had forgotten all about Elena's affair with the man who now ruled them. But then her ghost may have showed back up to remind them. Time now for the tale of the House of Seven Chimneys. One day after the sun had set and the moon rose high above the city, a farmer saw the spectral figure of a beautiful woman in a white dress standing high upon the roof of the House of Seven Chimneys. As he watched, he said the girl knelt and then pointed towards the Alcazar of Seville, the royal palace and home of Philip II at the time. The sighting occurred when the king had ordered renovations to transform Alcazar into a palace fit for royalty. To the farmer, it looked as if she were accusing the king of something, trying to draw attention to a misdeed. And the farmer was not the only one who saw the girl's ghost that night. Numerous sightings occurred, and now the citizens of Madrid once again discussed Elena's mysterious death. Some believe the girl on the roof was not Elena's ghost, but perhaps Elena's lost daughter, the ghost of a fetus who may or may not have existed. Others naturally did think she was the spirit of Elena herself, coming back to haunt the house where she was murdered. According to legend, the ghostly figure appeared nearly every night for months to lament the fate that befell her. And still sometimes today, visitors continue to claim to see her, either on the roof, roaming the halls, or in the room where she was found dead. She's also thought to be heard walking around. Numerous visitors and staff have reported hearing phantom footsteps. Elena's death in the House of Seven Chimneys was one of two mysterious deaths in the early years of the now historic residence. A notable resident in the 17th century was Sir Richard Fanshawe, English poet, diplomat, and translator who lived from June of 1608 to June of 1666. Fanshawe served as a secretary to the embassy for the English crown at the court of Spain, and then later as an ambassador to Spain. And while serving abroad, he lived in the House of Seven Chimneys. In 1666, Fanshawe was preparing to return to England when he died suddenly inside the mansion at the age of 58. There have long been reports of a man's ghost spotted roaming the upper halls of the palace and walking through walls. It's hard to tell if these alleged sightings began before Fanshawe died or after. Nearly 200 years later, in the 19th century, a bank purchased the House of Seven Chimneys. Before they could open for business, they needed to install a sewage system and restore some flooring. And while removing the original flooring, a work crew discovered a skeleton, buried along with a bag of gold coins. Whose skeleton this once belonged to remains unknown, but experts have determined the skeleton was a woman from the 16th century. Is it the missing body of Elena? Why was she buried with gold? Did whoever murdered her feel guilty and then bury her with gold as some sort of demented apology? To this day, no one is certain how this woman ended up buried beneath the floorboards of the House of Seven Chimneys. Currently, the house is home to Spain's Ministry of Culture, and allegedly during another renovation in the 1950s, a male skeleton was found inside the walls. Was this the body of the huntsman, Elena's father? Is it his ghost, not Sir Richard Fanshawe's, who still roams the halls? A father and daughter, both wronged in life over 3 centuries ago, still futilely seeking justice today? As more time passes, will more secrets be uncovered inside the walls of the House of Seven Chimneys? And will any of them ever finally solve the mystery of the murdered young lover of the king?
Interesting.
I know that would be so crazy to find a skeleton in your house. Like just under the floorboards, in the basement, in the walls. And it's happened like a lot of times over history.
I know. I was thinking like we're having some washer dryer issues.
Mm-hmm.
And anytime we have to have a service person come out to look at something, I'm like, oh God, what if they're like, okay, listen, we need to dig up. And then, okay, I get it. It's probably like a pipe problem, maybe just HVAC, whatever. And then you get into the walls or you get into the foundation and you're like,
I know. I think of like so many horror movies with that kind of stuff. Like, you start peeling back some carpet or whatever down in the basement above the concrete floor. And there's like a little square where the concrete is clearly like a different mix than the concrete around it. And it's like, uh-oh.
I mean, I would kind of like it though, because I do love a good murder mystery.
Uh-huh.
And our house has been pretty good lately. Or like I know our bedroom has felt a little funky, but it could also just be me. Like I'm not entirely sure if there's an energy shift there going on. But I think I could handle.
I mean, it would spice life up. I mean, it would be a fascinating thing to talk about for the rest of your life.
Could you imagine? That is the best dinner party story ever.
Yep. Oh my God. In this one house we lived in.
Yeah.
In the foundation, like there was this body and they found out it was the murdered lover of somebody who lived there before. Yeah.
That would be so great at dinner parties. We should just make that story up.
It is.
That would be so fun.
I wish I could remember now who the killer was.
Yeah.
But remember when we went to see Shane Moss at the Knitting Factory, friend of ours in comic.
Doing this great show about psychedelics.
Yep.
If you want to learn more about that, just absolutely informative and he's such a great guy.
Well, on our way out, we talked to some fans. Some fans stopped us and like, hey, can we get a picture? And then we were talking to them, and this one young woman who lives here in Coeur d'Alene was saying that a killer lived next door to her. It was a guy who was totally creepy, she said. And then all of a sudden the police come and they did arrest him for murder. And I can't remember the details of like who he killed. I think he killed a woman.
I think I know what she's talking about. It was like a very public story. He was a doctor and went back and forth between here and Las Vegas. There was something. Oh man.
Yeah, she said it was a public story, but I wasn't aware of it.
And I want to say he was killed on the lake or something. Shoot, and I can't remember the particulars. It was in the last 3 to 5 years.
She was killed in the lake?
Yeah.
Huh. But I remember asking her about that. I remember being like, how crazy was that?
Yeah, I just lived next door to that.
Yeah, and had interactions. And I remember he had come up with some like weird, he tried to get in her unit, not like break in.
Yeah.
But almost like invite himself in. Like it's like he was angling for an excuse to come into her place, get her to come into his place. But I remember like her specifically saying that he skeeved her out.
Yeah.
And that she was, shocked, but not totally shocked.
Yeah. I know it's so rare, in my opinion, in stories I've read or people that I've met along the way who have a story of like, oh my God, my neighbor or my friend's neighbor. And then you say like, well, what were they like? And you're like, oh, they totally gave me the heebie-jeebies. It's so rare that someone's like, and I had no idea. There was never any indication that they were a creep or a skeeve or psychopath.
That does happen too, but you're right.
So rare.
More times than not, it's like, oh yeah, something was off with that guy.
Yeah. Or that gal.
Usually guy though.
I don't know.
Statistically.
I know, but.
Yeah. 2 pictures. This first one, House of the Seven Chimneys. It looked originally in the 16th century.
How boring.
That's a little sketch.
No, it's just like a
big
rectangle.
Big block. And then
I'm counting the chimneys. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, just making sure.
And then this is one more, the House of the Seven Chimneys as it looks today.
Okay.
Yeah, and then that's it.
More interesting, but still. Are all 7 chimneys still there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, just checking again.
7 chimneys stand.
Just making sure. The House of Seven Chimneys makes me think of the movie Seven, and I do love that movie.
I know, it's so good.
What's in the box?
What's in the box?
Ah, man, Brad Pitt. He is a great actor.
He is.
He really is. I know everyone thinks he's so hot.
Pride of Springfield, Missouri.
Yeah. Well, I do have a little soft spot for Springfield, Missouri. Also, okay, when you were telling that story, the one guy, I can't remember now, but he lived from 1608 to 1666, and I was like, 666. Did the devil get him?
I don't
know. Or maybe that's who's buried there. Maybe he's a devil worshiper.
Maybe.
I didn't write his name down though. Whoopsies. Whoopsie daisies.
You got the devil in your brain because we watched. We'll talk about in the bonus episode, but First Omen
and Long Legs.
Oh yeah, because they were both satanic themes. Enjoyed both, by the way, just really quick.
Yes.
Yeah, they're both worth watching. Long Legs, I'm gonna have to see again. We were pretty high, and it is pretty weird.
I don't think it was weird because we were high. I think it's just
weird.
I
think it's genuinely weird.
Yeah, Nick Cage. He might be the king of weird. And I really like it.
Yeah, it was a very memorable performance.
Yes, and I had him on my brain because the Lalaurie mansion is for sale again in New Orleans, and he had owned that and was like, Yeah.
He's lived a life.
He is eclectic.
I think of that phrase like marches to the beat of their own drummer.
Yep.
Very much him.
You know what? I love it though.
Me too.
And he doesn't seem to make it anybody else's problem.
No.
So,
Yeah.
I don't know if he's a good guy or not. Like, I don't really know anything about him, but
He's unique, if nothing else.
He would, okay, you know when you play that game, like, okay, you're having a dinner party. You can like anybody you want. I feel like Nick Cage is a great wild card. It's like, you know, you pick like your favorite historical leader.
Right.
You pick, you know, incredible, strong women from the past.
Mm-hmm.
You pick, you know, your favorite athlete, what, you know, rock star.
Yep.
Nick Cage.
Nick Cage is to shake shit up.
I'm putting him on my list.
Nick Cage and Charlie Sheen. The two of those guys at a dinner.
I have less interest in Charlie Sheen. I'm just like, I think he's what you see.
I'd rather hang with Nick Cage myself.
Yeah, I'm
a big Nick Cage fan though. So.
I think.
Yeah, I just think Charlie Sheen. You wouldn't know what you were going to get.
Oh, see, I disagree. I think it's very obvious what you get. I think it's
crazy.
Yeah, I don't think there's
fair.
Anything interesting really going on there.
Yeah.
He just might be funny to watch, but I think I can get that with Nick Cage because I think Nick Cage is a little.
That's true.
A little crazy too.
Mm-hmm.
I want to have like Nick Cage sit down and talk to someone who is very, very, very intelligent and speaks in a very stiff kind of way, and just watch him be like, "Get the fuck out of here." That's what I imagine. Okay, well, you want to stay in warm climates and go to Mexico?
Sure.
Okay, let's get some sun. Hey, Dan and Lynze.
Hello.
My name is Susie, and I'm a total peeper and the owner of way too many crystals. I've been listening to your podcast since episode 2 and have not missed a single one. Please, dear Lord, keep doing what you're doing. Well, here we are. I hope you're still with us. Anyways, I've been thinking about sending in this story since you started sharing listener tales of terror, but I'm the world's biggest procrastinator, and honestly, it's taken me a long time to gather this into a solid story. So here we go. Let me preface this by saying I am a first-generation Mexican-American with a very large and very close-knit extended family. My mother is the second oldest of 13 children.
Wow.
Yes, 13 children born into a very poor area to the west of the Sierra Madre Occidental mountain range. Mm-hmm. My grandfather was a farmer with a small plot of land up on those mountains, a couple of pigs, and a horse. Nothing fancy. Their home, by the time I was old enough to remember the visits, was a small brick and cement 2-bedroom cottage with a corrugated metal roof and random windows with no glass in them, just mesh to keep out the bugs. Which wasn't so bad, since the view was one of lush green mountainsides on a quiet night, you could even hear the deep crystalline river that was no more than a 10-minute downhill walk from our front door. I spent almost every summer for 2 years, from 2 years old to my teens, in that cottage. My mother would drop me off at my abuela's house at the beginning of the summer, usually sporting jeans, Jordans, and a hoodie, only to retrieve me 2 months later, much tanner and having traded my sneakers for leather sandals. I loved those summers with my grandmother, where more often than not, one of my cousins would drop by, i.e., their parents had dropped them off too, and we'd spend whole weeks together. I never said no to sleeping over at Grandma's. Not until the summer I turned 12. That would be the last summer I ever spent the night by myself at my abuela's house. After my story, perhaps you'll see why. It was well into the summer before I turned 12 that I had managed to convince my Aunt Olivia to let my 10-year-old cousin Lupe stay with me at our grandmother's. They were about to head back to the city, and I had just come to visit, and we had just arrived from the States. I pleaded my case as only a dramatic tween girl could, and was told Lupe could stay so long as we promised to listen to our grandmother. Now, normally, my aunt wouldn't give a sleepover a second thought, but Lupe and I, well, we tended to do stupid things when we got together. Even though she was younger, Lupe always seemed so cool to me, and I had a hard time saying no to some of the antics she would come up with. Plus, I was fascinated by how much freedom kids were given in the country, and I took full advantage when I could. That evening, we asked Grandma if we could go to the river. Per usual, my grandma just nodded her head and said that was fine, but to remember to be back before the sun went down. That was really the only rule Grandma would absolutely not bend about. Always be back before dark. We probably yelled something non-committal. I honestly don't remember. All we cared about as 2 giggly tween girls was getting out from under adult supervision. We practically sprinted down the path. After what was probably 2 hours, but only felt like 5 minutes, of us skipping rocks and making mud pies, I started noticing the sky was definitely darker and thought we should probably start heading for home. Since I was the oldest, and honestly, I was always a bit of a goody two-shoes, I started telling Lupe we had to go. But she was not ready to leave yet. No, Lupe was bored and wanted to do something fun before my aunt picked her up again the next morning. And that's when she dared me to go over the bridge. Now, the bridge is a very loose term for what I'm about to describe. My cousin and I had taken the normal path that you take straight to the slow, shallow, safe part of the river. Here, there was almost no current, and the sand was light and super soft. There was a huge rock for sunbathing and a small 5-foot natural waterfall. In short, it was the perfect little spot to relax. However, if you went upstream, the river grew much more dangerous. There were pockets that had to be 20 feet deep, little whirlpools that would suck you in, and sharp rocks you did not want near any of your soft bits. The bridge was over one of the more deep areas of the river. It stretched from one embankment to the other with 4 old-ass frayed, dirty ropes, 2 tied parallel at ground level, 2 at about waist level. The waist level ones, I'm assuming, were their version of handrails. On the lower 2, someone had tied planks across the ropes. The problem wasn't necessarily how the bridge was made, but rather how long ago it had been made. This bridge had been unchanged before my mother can remember, and she just turned 55. Needless to say, its safety was questionable. But we were 11, and the bridge had become a rite of passage to every city kid that dared to come to the country. So even if I did briefly contemplate my own mortality, the fact that I had been dared negated all other arguments in my head. In the end, I said I would go only if Lupe did too, because she was from the city too, technically speaking. As we started walking closer, daring each other and hyping each other up, I kept glancing at the bit of sky I could see between the trees. It was definitely getting darker. As I thought about our grandma waiting out on the porch for us to come back, I got a heavy, uneasy feeling in the pit of my stomach. We really shouldn't be out here this late. The air around us had begun getting that almost surreal blue filter quality that declared it was getting to be that time of day between day and night. When Lupe and I finally got to the bridge, I was in full older sibling mode. I told Lupe to go first. It was late, and we had to get this over with and get our asses home. I remember Lupe just laughing and walking the first few boards before turning around to stick her tongue out at me. I flipped her off because this is how we showed affection as stupid, angsty preteens, thank you very much. And I followed maybe 6 or 7 feet behind her. The entire bridge is only about 20 feet long, and if I had to guess, maybe 30, 40 feet high from the stream's surface at its middle. It was when I was 3/4 of the way down the bridge, concentrating on where I was placing my feet because, oh hell no, I wasn't falling in, that I heard a terrifying scream followed by a thump. My heart leapt to my throat and I sighed with relief when I saw my cousin safely sitting on the bridge. Wait, why was she sitting? Lupe was only 10 feet away from the end of the bridge, but she was sitting down on a plank, feet dangling, hands gripping the lower ropes tight, shoulders humped over and shaking hard. I thought for a moment she must have fallen, and she was probably just laughing off the close call, like when you giggle after almost getting into an accident. I called her name, but she did not answer. Instead, I heard a whimper and saw the shaking intensify. The bad feeling that had been gnawing at me came on full force. I picked up the pace when I was finally right behind Lupe. I saw that she wasn't just shaking, she was crying. Hot, painful sobs seemed to lodge in her throat. Her eyes were huge, bugged out, and fear and panic looking straight into the river. She was absolutely terrified. I refused to look down to where she pointed. I knew I couldn't risk going into a panic if I saw how far up we were. I thought, this is what's going on. She's having a panic attack because she looked down, obviously. I tried shaking her, yelling in her face, but she would not budge. The only difference was now she was wailing, sobbing and crying, still looking straight down at the river. I finally remembered jumping over her to get to the other side. There was a good 2-foot space between the plank she was on and the next. It must have slipped out from underneath her and she fell on her ass on the plank behind her. I grabbed her head and yanked it up to look at me, anything to get her to stop focusing on what was terrifying her to death. But she wouldn't stop looking straight down. Finally, I looked down as well and I saw nothing. No river, just a muddy embankment. And I suddenly understood that we weren't actually that far up from the ground, maybe just a 6-foot drop. Weird, but okay, whatever. I jumped to the other side and ran the rest of the way off the bridge, then slid down the embankment. By the time I got to the place where my cousin was, she was no longer sobbing. She looked confused as I told her to jump down and I'd catch her. She did, and I asked her with no incident. She did as I asked with no incident, her face wet and boogery. Maybe she snapped out of it when she realized we weren't that high up after all. I don't know. Whatever the reason for her mini meltdown, it had to wait. At this point, the sky was more navy than blue, and that realization was dawning on us fast. We ran all the way back to my grandmother's house that evening. The house was a shiny white beacon by the time we came up to it, the sun having set completely maybe just 5 minutes before we entered my grandparents' driveway. Standing by the porch was my grandmother. She did not say a word, but I could see she was worried. She quickly shooed us inside and told us to get ready for bed and to stay there. She led us into the house, still looking suspiciously onto the darkened path we had just come from. I remember because I thought it was strange. Like, who else was she expecting to see other than us? Lupe and I got ready for bed quietly, not daring to say a word. Like I said, this is a tiny-ass shack house. I absolutely loved it, but private, it was not. If we said anything about what had happened at the bridge, there was a good chance one of our grandparents would overhear and then they'd tell our parents. No, thank you. We both changed into our PJs, got into the matching twin beds, and closed the door from our bedroom that led straight into the living room. Our grandparents' room shared a wall with us, the white, painted brick only going up about 8 feet before it stopped. We could always hear my grandfather snoring, as if he were in the room with us. And so we settled in for the night. Subdued, sure, but still riding the high of getting away with something. Later that night, I woke up to absolute silence. The air felt heavy and oppressive. I fought to wake up, still bleary and not entirely coherent. And that was when I heard it. A wailing sound. I was instantly awake. I opened my eyes, looking straight ahead at the door to the bedroom. I instinctively pulled the covers up to my chin and strained my ears. There it was again. Something was in pain out there, and I could swear it was coming closer. At first, I tried to convince myself it was a cat. I knew they could sometimes sound eerily similar to a crying baby. That had to be it, right? The next anguish cry sounded like it was coming up the path from the river, and it was definitely not a cat. No, this was bigger, heavier, high-pitched at the end, like a woman. Oh God, there was a woman screaming like she was seriously hurt just outside our front door. Could no one else hear this? It was the kind of anguished moan of someone trying to move with a very serious injury. There were no words, just cries of pain and deep despair. And then I heard Lupe choke back a sob. I turned to see her, and the same panic flashed through her eyes that I had seen back at the bridge. She was shaking and crying. I immediately made a motion for her to shut up, but she was too far gone and couldn't keep it in. I jumped from my bed and ran into hers, hugging her tight, putting a hand over her mouth as we heard a new wail coming from what sounded like the goddamn front porch. I kept murmuring things to my little cousin, trying to keep her calm, trying to keep her quiet. And I just couldn't understand, where were our grandparents? I couldn't hear Grandpa's snoring. There was no way they couldn't hear what we were hearing. As that thought ran through my mind, my cousin whimpered again, and then a new scream echoed in the freaking living room. Oh my God, she was there, right the fuck there. The walls practically vibrated with the screams, which were almost beastly now. They were no longer cries of pain, but rather screams of rage. So scared, I didn't have time to think. I acted on instinct. I screwed my eyes shut tight and started praying the Hail Mary, the Our Father rosary style. Thank you, Sunday school. I repeated the words like a chant, all the while my ears hurt from the volume of the screaming. I was beyond scared shitless. And then, as suddenly as it began, it was gone. The screaming stopped. It felt like when the air pressure makes your ears pop in an airplane. I could hear Grandpa's snores again, the crickets started chirping outside, and slowly, the night noises of the countryside began filtering in through the walls again. Lupe finally looked up from where she had buried her face in my chest, and I motioned for her to keep quiet. I had no idea what had just happened. We fell asleep sometime after seeing the bluish light of dawn peek in through the door crack. Lupe left that next morning back to Guadalajara. I went home with my mom the next day. I never stayed at my grandmother's by myself again, and Lupe and I never talked about what happened. Well, only once. I live in the States and Lupe lives in Mexico, but we've tried to keep in touch through what else? Social media. In 2019, when The Curse of La Llorona came out, my cousin shared the trailer on Facebook. I commented on it joking, but not really, how I don't think I could see that movie even after all this time. I immediately got a private message from her asking me what the fuck I meant by that. I was startled. I knew we'd never talked about it, but we had always been good friends and had stayed that way over the years. I asked her if she really didn't remember, or was she just messing with me? And then she proceeded to tell me she had thought for nearly 20 years that everything that had transpired that night had been nothing but a horrible dream. I never asked her what she saw that day on the embankment, but after everything else I've experienced over the years, I don't know if I need to. The only thing I will say is, if you ever fancy yourself a nice walk by a river or a hike in the lush, lonely forests of the Sierra Madre, always, always be back before dark or something might just follow you back. With love, Susie.
Thanks, Susie. Yeah, I couldn't remember the name of La Llorona, but I wrote down stuff like we covered or had a story based on her in one of the All Hallows Eve, Scared to Death Lives, like one of those live shows.
Yeah.
And I had like the river imagery. I remember like there was an association with that legend of the river. I feel like in the legend, her kid died.
She drowns her kids.
Okay, I can remember if she killed her kids or if
I'm remembering correctly.
I think you are. And that like her spirit then like
walks the embankment
looking for her kids, almost like she went crazy and didn't realize that she killed them or something. Yes, but I remember that movie, watching the trailer.
Yeah.
But I couldn't remember the actual name, La Llorona.
I loved this story because it just felt so relatable. Just like, two kids staying at grandma's, sneaking out and like we know we don't want to upset grandma, but also like, it's just like 5 minutes late and the dare across the bridge and just, the silly things we do that seem so big and important in those moments. And then just like, I love when she says like, we got into bed and like, a little like high from like, we got away with it. And then to have it come back to haunt them that night. Yeah, I just felt very, very much connected to this story.
What is it with like kids and dares and stuff? It's such a funny childhood thing.
Yeah.
And not even sometimes with dares, but you just do like death-defying or courageous things to impress your little kid. And it will impress them.
Yes.
Like, the girl will go out with you because you did this stupid thing.
Yeah, maybe.
Or, like whatever. But it's such a funny, like all around the world, just kids of every culture, go through that phase.
I know. I don't.
Bet you're too afraid to do this.
Yeah, dare you to. Yeah. Yeah. And it always seems to happen like in groups. Like, this is just two cousins, but it's usually like a slightly larger group. And peacocking and all the things.
Or just showing off your siblings. I mean, it's like.
I was never impressed by the boys that did the dares.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, you idiot.
Oh, funny. Yeah.
I'm a pretty practical person, I think. So like for me, I was like, okay, that's so stupid.
Yeah, I can't think of like a specific one, but I remember like I would do like I went through a phase like when I was a teenager for sure of like, oh, no one else, I'll do that.
Yeah,
like just be like the crazier one or whatever.
You're still like that.
So I saw or just reminded me too, like when we were in Missoula, and it just threw me back to that period of my childhood. There was those kids jumping off that bridge, which I did growing up.
My God, that was terrifying.
But this one kid, I mean, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't impressed. He clearly is like on the dive team or something. But not only like he didn't just jump where everybody else jumped.
Yeah.
He climbed up even higher. And
it was like a huge like pylon underneath a bridge.
And then they were like double flip. And I was like, I remember my head being like, I don't think that's a good idea. Sure enough, he did it and landed it. And I was like, I applauded when he came out of the water.
It is like a weird thing because just to give some context to that, the day before we were walking over a bridge and we were looking down at the river like, oh, cool, that's the river we're going to float tomorrow.
So shallow.
Like so shallow that from, I don't know how high up, but like high up, you could see the bottom of the river.
Oh, in most places, the Clark Fork there is like, I think it's the Clark Fork, like 3-4 feet deep. I mean,
shallow. So then when we're on this float trip and they're giving us like the safety instructions and they're like, okay, and then just so you know, like you might see some bridge jumpers. And quite frankly, what I thought she was saying was like, be aware of like a suicide attempts. I did not think that she was being funny. I thought it was like, hey,
Yeah.
Nope. Because then we come upon this kid and I'm thinking in this moment, I'm like, you can't dive into this water at all. You can't jump in it.
There was a hole there.
Yeah. And I mean, we have no idea how big the hole is, but it seemed like a very narrow spot. So then like the mom in me is like near vomiting as he jumps off this pylon and starts to do these flips.
Yeah.
But then I was holding my breath and I saw him come back up from under the water and I felt fine. And then I wanted to call his mom. I wanted to lecture him.
Tell David to stay away from the bridge.
Tell him you don't have insurance for broken arms. Okay. Do you have time for one more, Dan?
I do.
You do?
I do.
Okay, great. This is fantastic. So just a reminder, this is a little story about thinking you're home alone when maybe you're not.
Okay.
Hey, Dan and Lynze. I found your podcast about 6 months back and love it. 100% creeper here, huge horror movie fan, and amateur paranormal investigator that enjoys going to all the haunted places. I have always believed, but it wasn't until these events that I started seeking out proof and making my way to notorious and not so notorious haunted locations. A few years back, I moved into a townhome that was built in the early 1970s. I was moving in as a third roommate, and I was given the option of a tiny bedroom on the third floor, or I could create my own bedroom in the unfinished basement. I decided to go with the basement. I put up cardboard walls to create a square for my bedroom, 2 walls of cardboard with an open space for a door, and the other 2 walls were brick. Over the cardboard, I tacked on curtains to create a homier feel. I know, classy. For the doorway, I had a curtain hanging down that would move to the left or to the right when walking into my makeshift room. Over the first few months, various paranormal events were happening. I would see movement or shadows in my peripheral vision, but then, of course, when I would look, nothing would be there. Lights would flicker, my TV would turn itself on and off, small items would be moved around the room, and I would notice them not being where I had last left them. But to me, these events were minimal and easy enough for me to ignore. During this time, I was in a bit of denial of what was going on, though. I thought if I didn't acknowledge it or give it my energy, it would stop on its own. About 6 months into living in the basement, I had invited over a new girlfriend for the first time. It was only her and I in the townhouse. We were in the beginning stages of our new friendship, and talking about my ghost problem with her never crossed my mind. I mean, I didn't want her to think I was a weirdo or something. I was in the process of giving her a tour of the house, and it was time to show her my room in the basement. We were talking as we were walking down the steps, and when we hit the last step, we both heard a loud, solid thud directly above us. We were startled as the noise was incredibly loud and caught us off guard. And it should be noted that from my time in the basement, I had learned which noises were coming from upstairs or from the neighbors on either side, and this was absolutely without a doubt in my living room. Anyways, after a moment, there was a second loud thud directly above us in the living room area. An overwhelming feeling of dread rushed over me, my blood ran cold, and I knew something was very wrong. As my friend and I waited in silence to see if we would hear anything further, very loud, heavy footsteps began walking around the living room. They made their way up the staircase leading to the third floor. The footsteps ran up the stairs, and once the footsteps made it to the top, we heard a door slam on the third floor. The look on my new friend's face was one of pure terror. Trying to defuse the situation and not freak her out any further, I thought maybe one of my roommates had come home, and those were the noises they were hearing. Too terrified to go upstairs yet, I started calling out my roommate's name from the bottom of the steps. Ryan, is that you? Are you home? But there was no response. After getting my wits about me, we both slowly made our way up the basement stairs to the main level. Once we reached the main level, we made our way to the living room, trying to rationalize the situation. I tried to determine what the 2 loud thud noises were caused by. The living room was just as we had left it, nothing lying on the floor nor out of place. Next, the entryway was examined. The door was still locked, and there were no new shoes in the entryway to indicate a roommate had come home. Not being able to find a logical explanation for what we had heard, the terror began to set in. My friend and I ran out the front door. Both of us rattled. We started to replay the events, still not fully believing what we had experienced, if anything at all. During our recap, we admitted to one another that we were both very open to the paranormal. Neither of my roommates believed in the paranormal, so for the 2 of us to be the only people in the house and for both of us to 100% believe in the paranormal, I wondered if maybe it had allowed the spirit in the house to reach out. About 20 minutes later, my roommate Ryan did come home. We told him what happened, but of course he didn't believe us. He did search the house, though, to make sure there was no one hiding out that was from this world. And of course, no one was found. A couple nights later, I'd been sleeping in my basement room when I woke up lying across my bed on my back opposite of the normal way, with my head hanging off the edge, so I was looking upside down at the entry to my bedroom. I was in a dreamlike state and couldn't move, but I'm certain I was not sleeping. While lying there, I saw a very tall figure standing in my doorway. From the height of my makeshift walls, I was able to conclude the figure would have been about 7 feet tall. While the figure was standing there, it was holding the doorway curtain open, staring at me. The next morning, I woke up knowing what I saw the night before and was this person that had been trying to get my attention all along. I don't know how I knew this, but the feeling was very certain to me. I decided to move my bedroom upstairs for my own sanity. After doing so, I saged the entire house while telling the spirit they were no longer welcome here. The following summer, my other roommate let her brother move in for the summer while he was doing his police officer training. One day, the cadets were given real cases that had happened so they could explain how they would respond to each situation, a learning tool. He was given a case from the early 80s involving a man who had died by suicide inside his vehicle in a parking lot. Turns out, that parking lot was our parking lot. It was directly in front of our townhouse. When he told me this, I knew the man I'd been seeing in the house was this same man all along. I cannot explain how I knew this to be true, but I am certain. Kayla.
Thanks, Kayla.
I love confirmations.
I know. Yeah, I was thinking that. Like, I mean, so rare that you would be able to get that.
Yes.
But like, what a fortuitous thing for her to find out, like, or to have that, kind of like fall in her lap there.
Yeah, because I mean, what are the odds?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But there would be some like training exercise where they would like talk about a death, and then that would happen to be right there. Oh, it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Just absolutely fantastic to find out. Like, okay, I'm not crazy. Like what I was feeling.
Nice closure.
I do have thoughts though in those moments of like, what if you're not right? What if it's something else? What if it comes back? But I would do what Kayla did, and I would just be like, yep, that's what happened, and then just like.
I know, because you'd be like, was he 7 feet tall? Because that.
I know. I would be having more questions for the roommate's brother. Like, how much of that case can you tell me about? So I need to look this person up. I need to know what they look like. Did they wear hats? Did they not wear hats? Were they tall? Were they short? Were they fat? Were they slim? Like,
That's a creepy nightmare image that was in that story of just like in that makeshift room down in the basement, pulling the curtain aside.
I know.
That's a much scarier to me than an entity that is peeking around a curtain.
Oh yeah, that it like.
Because then you would like know that it can interact with the physical space around it.
I didn't even think about that. I was thinking about like waking up in the opposite position in your bed, and she said that her head was like hanging off the bed. That alone would kind of bother me because while I'm a fidgety sleeper, like I'm just a fidgety person.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever woken up completely twisted around.
I haven't. Yeah, I've maybe when I was younger, like a little kid, kind of moving around, on the side, like I'd turned like halfway around in the bed, maybe.
Yeah,
but never all the way around, to my knowledge.
Something about that is like upsetting.
I
don't, because there is this weird thing. Like it is kind of strange that we move in our sleep because you're not in a conscious state. Like you're not like, oh, I'm uncomfortable. I'm going to shift my weight around. But in your sleep state, your body decides it's uncomfortable and moves around. It's kind of strange.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, that we can like not wake up.
I
wonder if we like
but still
kind
our
of wake
brain
up.
fires and tells us to like move into
Or do we
this
kind of
position.
wake up and then we just forget?
I don't know. Probably that's probably more realistic, but
because that is weird to think about that we could be totally asleep. Well, I mean, people sleepwalk.
That is true.
So yeah, people do move around, who are definitely like dead asleep.
I thought you were gonna say people who move who are definitely dead. I was like,
that's the thing. Everybody knows that's the thing.
Dead people go for walks
for like the next day or so after you die. That your body can just you bend around in the bed or go for a little walk to the bathroom, whatever. Some crazy belief I've held on to.
So nonsense, such nonsense.
Well, good job. I know you weren't feeling good, but it didn't appear that way today.
Yeah, Dan was sick and he gave me his sickness, but I don't think it hit me the way it hit you. I think I'm fine today. I'm still a little tired.
Yeah, you felt off this morning.
I did.
Yeah, having temperature regulation problems.
Yeah, but I
nauseous.
Oh yeah, I did have like a huge wave of nausea. That's true. After I had some soup for lunch, it was like, I really thought I was gonna yak.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I still got it.
Now you're good. Going strong. You want to thank some Annabelles?
Okay.
Okay.
I'd like to thank the following Annabelles for helping us to make the donation to the Y'all Squad this month. This might be the best name ever.
It is such a fun name.
Oh, no, the name I'm about to say.
Oh, okay.
But Y'all Squad is also super fun. Okay. Titzilla.
Titzilla. I hope Titzilla has very small breasts.
Oh my God. Negative A cups.
Just to make it funnier.
Oh, yes. Let us know.
Like a big guy named Tiny?
Let us know, Tits. Serotonin, but like Sarah, the name.
Nice.
Totem. I was like, that's a good play on words. Allie. Isaiah Archuleta. Dolores Ann Torres. Sarah Fleming, Vicky Maitland, and Aaron Parker.
I keep thinking of Titzilla. It reminds me of like a obviously with Godzilla reference there, but like a B horror movie, but like that kind of vibe of like pulp horror movie from like the 60s or 70s. Grindhousey, but also porno, like soft porn.
Yeah.
Where there's
like a lot of like wet t-shirt kind of stuff.
There's nudity,
but like
people
minimal.
are fooling around, but there's no penetration.
Yeah. Full bush.
right.
It's very specific.
Yep, and the lead actress is Tittzilla. And I just picture like these. She's like in the movie, like the cheesy kind of like practical effects, I think they call them, where it's like they have her walk through like a little model town that's supposed to be a real city, like Godzilla just smashing buildings.
Okay.
Ideally with her boobs, just like flipping around her boobs.
What if she just squeezes her tits and they shoot
like
out
lasers?
milk?
Oh, milk. Okay.
And they like knock buildings down, like milk lasers.
I do like that. Yep, just sending people flying, people like fleeing for their lives. And then she grabs one guy, kind of like King Kong. King Kong grabbed the girl, like in her hands, but instead of like being freaked out once he gets close to her, he's like,
and then he just like motorboats.
That's her move. She takes him. He's like an action figure size to her, and he just like smashes him back and forth between her giant boobs.
Oh, okay.
It's a good movie.
It's great. I loved it.
Okay.
Roger and Ebert give it 2 thumbs up.
Oh, totally. Okay, I'd like to thank the following Annabelles as well. No Tittzilla over here, but we got
some good ones.
Deputy Mouse 48, Emmanuel Andrade, Ollie, Krista Rivas. I wonder if Emmanuel Andrade is related to Austin Andrade.
I know. I wonder. Long-time fan. Man, Austin's been with us forever.
John Parker, Daniel Hayes, Nicole Deppe, Kitty Hilborn, Matthew Thompson, and Jordan Mold. Mr. Mold.
Oh, I'm sure he's heard it all. Before I do my spoopy shout-outs, you didn't even comment on my super fun Baphomet shirt.
I know, you do have a really like, it's a very like light-hearted demon-y Scared to Death podcast shirt.
I know. Now you can see it.
Oh, I love the colors.
This is on our website right now. It's a collaboration that we did with Harley Warren. I love it.
It's very cool.
It's like Baphomet and then like this like rainbow floating bodies and a pentagram, but it's like low key.
It is low key. If you saw, you say, oh, it's like a fun summery shirt.
Exactly. Which is why I wore it today. Okay.
Spoopy shoutouts.
Spoops. To the sexy cupcake cowboy, aka the beast from the east, from the curly-haired Lucifina. Happy birthday. Let's continue to mesh our weird together. I love you. I know. I'm like, that's it. We're friends with these people.
Let's continue to mesh our weird together. I love it.
To Spooky Boo Ella from your spooky mom, Alana. Happy 11th birthday. I love you. To Ryan from Ashley Arwin, Cass, and Zapple. Happy 42nd birthday from your weirdo family. We love you to death and appreciate all you do for us more than you could ever know. To Kelsey from Kelsey. Happy 34th birthday to me. And to Janessa from Emmanuel, happy 3rd anniversary. I love you so much. I hope we spend many, many more years together with your craziness and ugly cats.
Cute.
I love the ugly cats. I bet that's like some ongoing, like, don't call my cats ugly.
And that is our show.
That's it.
Thanks for continuing to send in your personal tales of terror to mystory@scaredtodeathpodcast.com. You can email us for everything else at info@scaredtodeathpodcast.com. Thanks to Logan Keith, editing, scoring today's show. And any final words from the producers, Mike, before you head to Indiana?
Oh, man. It's been a ride. It's been really fun. And yeah, I was telling Kate on the way over, I was like, oh, man, I think I'm going to have to say something today. And I don't really know what to say. It's been, I'm very fortunate and happy that we're going to continue working together.
Yeah, us too.
The show is still going to go on. It's just going to have, a little different process behind the curtain, but the people listening, they, it's going to be, like you said, you mentioned like the audio will be a little bit sweeter.
Yeah.
So that'll be a plus. But other than that, like, show still goes on.
Yep.
And it'll be, it's all bittersweet, man. There's like, there's things out here that the decision to move home was really tough and took a toll on me, my family, and like, but once we made that, and we all worked together through how this would look, and that's the other thing too is, as the lineup, so to speak, has changed here over the years, and the industry has changed, and so much has changed since I've come out here that I am fortunate to be in the position where, because I came out here not doing this, I was doing the art And then, I stepped in on Is We Dumb and then Time Suck and then this. And now it's everything. And I love doing it. And,
awesome.
And if you had to pinpoint me to the best thing I like about the job, I have to say scoring Scared to Death and Nightmare Fuel has to be up there as like one of the favorite things I get to consistently do, because it's like, it's my playground.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've been doing a great job.
Thank you. So we're headed out here in a couple days, and I think by the time people listen to this one, actually,
you'll be there.
I'll be there.
You should be in and settled and getting kids ready for school.
Yeah, it starts because school in Indiana starts sooner than it does out here, so we're not playing with a whole lot of time.
No, we're excited for you, and it's good for your family. It's good for your mental health. It's going to be great. And like Logan said, like the things have changed so much. Like when you came out here, editing podcasts from afar was not a thing.
It was much harder.
Did. Yeah. I mean, it could be done, but it just wasn't.
Yeah.
We just didn't have the capabilities for a variety of reasons. And so it's cool that like as a collective, we've evolved and and Logan's going to keep putting all his sweet touches on the episodes, and we're excited for you guys to absorb the new audio. And
I can't wait for you to hear it.
It's going to sound so good. You guys, I think you're going to be surprised because we already get so many lovely compliments about how professional the show sounds and how seriously we take it, and we don't eat on mic and like all these like little things that, don't seem like a big deal. And they're like, oh, the scoring, I think you're just going to be like, I didn't know it could get better.
Yep. For you, audio files.
Yep.
I think, like you'll notice, it won't be compressed, or maybe Logan can speak to that better. But it'll be have more
got
range,
a little bit sweeter EQ on it. It's not an earth shattering difference. Like you're not. It's not.
I noticed it right away though.
But it is. It's a little clearer, I would say.
Crisp.
Best way I could say is like if you put like a very light blanket over a speaker, and now you're taking it off.
I like that.
Get a little bit more of that high end, and it's just a little bit sweeter of a mix. And when we got some new equipment so that we could take care of this, and in doing that, just transferring over settings, new stuff, it's going to be a little different. So we use that as an opportunity to just improve on kind of what we had going.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So guys, in life, when you're faced with new things, like challenges come and but it's incredible if you can find silver linings and use those opportunities as chances to improve.
Adapt and evolve.
Nailed it.
And you know what? I'll just thank Sophie for finding the first story this week, Olivia Lee finding the second, and let's get out of here.
See ya.
Enjoy your nightmares, creeps and peepers. Hope you were scared to death.
Bye.
If spirits threaten me in this place, fight water by water and fire by fire. Banish their souls into nothingness and remove their powers until the last trace. Let these evil beings flee through time and space. Evil may pass through, but hath no home here within, scared to death.
Bad Magic Productions.
Like Godzilla just smashing buildings, ideally with her boobs.